You think quitting is harmless? You tell yourself it's just you choosing your battles. But what if I told you it's not random? What if I told you someone else has been counting on it? Because in war, you don't always need to kill the enemy to win. Sometimes you just need to make them walk away. This is the strategy Sun Tzu wrote about over 2,000 years ago. Not to charge head-on, not to break the walls, but to surround, to pressure, to exhaust, until the enemy opens their own gates. And right now, that's exactly what's happening to you. The job that keeps piling on meaningless tasks until you start fantasizing about leaving. The supportive friend who always reminds you how risky your plans are. The constant little setbacks, missed calls, failed attempts, random bad luck. Each one a drop in the bucket, until you finally decide it's not worth it. You think you're making a personal choice. You're not. You're carrying out someone else's plan. Because the truth is brutal. If they can't beat you outright, they'll make you beat yourself. And here's the part they hope you never realize. Quitting isn't neutral. It doesn't just stop your progress. It hands them exactly what they wanted. When you stop, they win. When you walk away, they don't just breathe easier. They write you off forever. The siege doesn't have to be loud. In ancient warfare, an army could sit outside your walls for months, cutting off food, water, and supplies. No direct assault, no obvious violence. They simply waited for hunger, fear, and doubt to do the work for them. Now imagine that siege is happening in your mind. Every delay, every piece of discouraging feedback, every reminder of how far you still have to go, those are the blockades. They wear you down without ever throwing a punch. The longer you stay under siege, the more the walls inside you start to crumble. And the moment you convince yourself that surrender is your own idea, they've already won. Here's the worst part. Most of the time, it doesn't even feel like war. It feels like life. It feels like bad timing. It feels like just the way things go. But look closer, and you'll see the pattern. Your confidence drops right when you start gaining ground. Your focus shatters every time you get close to a breakthrough. Something, someone, keeps making the road just hard enough that you'll decide it's not worth walking. That's not random. That's strategy. And if you want proof, think about the times you've been underestimated. Think about how fast people stop doubting you when you actually win. They don't argue anymore. They don't throw obstacles in your way. They go quiet. Why? Because you broke the siege. The people who count on you quitting understand something you might not. The human mind will invent 1,000 justifications for surrender when it's been pushed into exhaustion. You'll tell yourself you're being realistic. You'll call it taking a step back. You'll even dress it up as self-care. But if you're honest, it's none of those things. It's escape. And every time you choose it, you confirm their bet that you'd never last. This is why Sun Tzu wrote, "Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting." The battle isn't lost when they overpower you. It's lost the second you start doubting your reason to keep going. So here's the shift you need to make. Stop seeing quitting as harmless. Stop thinking it's a private decision with no impact. Every surrender is a gift you hand to someone who wanted it from the beginning. The next time you feel that pull to stop, don't just ask, "Do I have the energy to continue?" Ask, "Who gets what they want if I walk away right now?" Because once you see quitting as cooperation with the enemy, you can't unsee it. And if you still choose to stop, at least you'll know exactly who you're helping. In war, the slow kill is the sure kill. You don't need to break the enemy in a day. You just need to make every day feel a little heavier than the last. This is the essence of a siege. Not an explosion of violence, but a constant pressure that makes resistance feel pointless. And in your life, this siege is invisible. Because it doesn't look like soldiers at the gate. It looks like life simply wearing you down. Think about the last time you gave up on something you once cared about. Was it one big event that broke you? Or was it a long, quiet accumulation of small setbacks, each one convincing you just a little more that it wasn't worth it? That's the invisible siege. It's the harmless advice from people who tell you to slow down, but somehow never encourage you to speed back up. It's the opportunity that keeps getting pushed to next quarter until you stop asking about it. It's the distraction that shows up at the exact moment you're about to make progress. On the surface, none of these moments look coordinated. But the effect is the same as cutting off supplies in a siege. Your momentum starves, your confidence weakens, and your vision starts to shrink. Sun Tzu understood this well. He wrote, "If your enemy is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. If your opponent is temperamental, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant." Read that again. Pretend to be weak so they grow arrogant. That arrogance makes them slow, it makes them careless. And a careless opponent can be made to waste their strength on nothing. Now turn it around. What if you are the one being made to waste your strength? You waste it on meaningless arguments, on busy work that looks productive but moves nothing forward, on overthinking problems that were never yours to solve. The siege works because it keeps you too tired to notice you're not actually losing the fight. You're just not fighting the right one. The more distracted you are, the less dangerous you are. The more exhausted you are, the easier you are to discourage. And eventually, you don't need to be attacked at all. You'll lower your own flag. The most dangerous thing about the invisible siege is that it hides behind normal life. You'll tell yourself, it's just a busy season. You'll convince yourself you're taking a break to get clarity. But months pass, and when you look back, you see that the break never ended. This is why so many people never come back from a pause. It's not because they can't. It's because the siege has rewired them to believe they're already finished. The ancient generals knew that the mind was the real fortress. Once doubt and fatigue get inside it, the gates to the city open themselves. And here's where it gets even more dangerous. The siege doesn't have to come from an enemy who even knows you exist. Sometimes it comes from a system, a workplace, a culture, a social group that runs on keeping people compliant, predictable, and safe. Your failure to advance is not always the result of malice. Sometimes it's the side effect of a machine that feeds on people who stop asking for more. But whether it's personal or structural, the result is the same. You stop before the fight is over. So how do you see the siege when it's invisible? You look for the patterns. You look for the moments when the same kinds of obstacles show up right before you make a leap forward. You notice when the same people become strangely absent or unhelpful when you're about to win. You track the times when you just happen to feel most tired, most doubtful, most distracted. right when persistence would have mattered most. That's when you know. That's when you see it for what it is. Because once you can see the siege, you can survive it. And surviving it changes everything. Because the enemy's greatest weapon is your ignorance. And the moment you understand their game, you can start playing your own. In the next part, we're going to dig into the psychology of how a siege breaks you from the inside. How fatigue, isolation, and subtle manipulation rewire your mind so that quitting feels like the only sane option. Because until you know how the trap works, you'll never know how to walk out of it alive. When they can't touch your body, they go for your mind. A siege isn't just about cutting off food or water. It's about cutting off hope. Because once hope is gone, resistance is just a performance waiting to collapse. The invisible siege works the same way. It's not always the lack of resources that ends you. It's the mental erosion that convinces you you've already lost. Here's how it happens. First comes fatigue. Not the obvious physical kind you can fix with a good night's sleep, but the deeper kind that comes from spending your energy on the wrong things. Fighting battles you didn't choose. Carrying responsibilities that aren't yours. Solving problems that don't matter. The siege thrives on this misdirection. It wants you to confuse effort with progress, so that by the time you realize you're standing still, you're too tired to move at all. Then comes isolation. This doesn't always mean being physically alone. It means being cut off from people who would remind you who you are at your best. It's being surrounded instead by those who subtly reinforce the idea that maybe it's better if you slow down, back off, or just stay where you are. Sun Tzu warned, "He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight." But under a siege, you forget the choice is even yours to make. You start believing the only options are the ones you've been handed. And that's when the third stage hits. Doubt. Doubt doesn't shout at you. It whispers. It creeps in during the moments you're already questioning yourself. It shows up as little mental questions. Is this worth it? What if I fail? Who am I to think I can do this? One whisper becomes two. Two become four. And before long, doubt is no longer a visitor. It's a resident. This is the real trap. Once doubt takes root, your mind will start manufacturing evidence to support it. You'll reinterpret every small setback as proof you were right to hesitate. Every delay becomes a sign that it's just not meant to be. Every failure becomes a prophecy fulfilled. This is psychological warfare. And the danger is that it feels like your own voice. By the time you're deep in it, you're not even resisting the siege anymore. You're maintaining it yourself. Because when your brain is tired, when your confidence is low, the easiest relief is to stop trying. It feels rational. It feels responsible. It feels like you're protecting yourself. But here's the truth. You're not protecting yourself. You're protecting your enemy's investment. They've invested time, pressure, and strategy into making you second-guess yourself. And when you quit, the return on that investment is total. Sun Tzu said, "If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant." Now think about how this plays out in your life. They don't just push until you break. They pull back at just the right time, so you convince yourself that stepping away is entirely your own choice. That is the genius of the trap. It doesn't force you out. It lets you walk out willingly. And here's the kicker. Once you've done it once, you're more likely to do it again, because quitting gets easier every time. The first time, it feels like a big decision. The second time, it feels familiar. The third time, it feels inevitable. That's how good people, capable people, end up spending years circling the same unfinished goals, always telling themselves they'll get back to it someday. But someday never comes. Because the siege doesn't need to destroy you outright. It just needs to keep you in the loop. And the longer you're in the loop, the more you become the one reinforcing the walls around you. The escape from this trap begins with one thing: recognizing that your current mental state is not the result of random weakness. It's the result of a process, a strategy, that was designed to make you feel exactly like this. And once you can name it, you can stop blaming yourself for feeling worn down and start thinking about how to fight back. In the next part, we're going to talk about what that fight looks like. The counteroffensive you can launch even when you're tired, surrounded, and low on confidence. Because if the siege's power is built on slow erosion, then the key to breaking it is to start showing cracks in their plan instead. To survive a siege, you don't have to destroy the enemy overnight. You just have to make their plans stop working. That's what the counteroffensive is. Not charging recklessly at the gates. Not wasting your last reserves on a dramatic final stand. It's disrupting their pattern until they can no longer predict you or break you. The first step is micro-victories. In siege warfare, a small breach in the enemy's encirclement could change everything. A secret tunnel for supplies. A messenger who slips through the lines. It didn't have to be a total escape. It just had to prove survival was still possible. In your life, micro-victories are the proof that the siege is not airtight. They can be small, so small they look insignificant from the outside. Finishing one page of the book you've been avoiding. Sending the email you've been putting off for weeks. Taking one deliberate action toward the goal they want you to forget. These actions aren't about speed, they're about momentum. Momentum is contagious. Once you have it, even in small doses, it becomes harder for the siege to freeze you in place. The second step is rotate the battlefield. A siege works because the enemy knows exactly where you are, exactly how you live, exactly how to cut off your resources. When you change your environment, physically, mentally, or socially, you disrupt that intelligence. If the same desk, the same people, and the same routines are reinforcing your sense of defeat, change them. Move your workspace. Work at odd hours. Seek out conversations with people outside your usual circle. Even the smallest changes send a message to you and to them that you are not static prey. The third step is quiet defiance. This is where you stop feeding the siege with visible signs of your struggle. When an enemy sees you faltering, it confirms their approach is working. When they see you steady, composed, and still moving, it forces them to question whether they're actually winning. This doesn't mean faking joy or pretending everything is perfect. It means refusing to give away the play-by-play of your exhaustion. You keep moving in silence. You hold your ground without announcement, and over time, the absence of visible weakness becomes its own weapon. Sun Tzu wrote, "Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt." Quiet defiance is the darkness. Micro-victories and rotation are the preparation. And when the moment comes to act, you strike in a way they didn't see coming. Now here's what you need to understand about the counteroffensive. It's not about winning in one move. It's about showing that you can't be predicted, can't be cornered, and can't be counted out. When the siege fails to produce the surrender they expected, it forces your opponent to make a choice. Commit more resources than they planned, or abandon the siege altogether. Either way, you've already won something vital. You've broken the illusion that you were ever trapped. And here's the deeper truth. The counteroffensive doesn't just weaken their position, it rewires yours. Every micro-victory is evidence that your effort matters. Every change in environment is proof you can adapt. Every act of quiet defiance builds the identity of someone who can't be quietly erased. It's not the grand victory that matters right now. It's building the habit of resistance. Because habits, like sieges, work over time, and the habit of not giving in is the strongest wall you can build. The siege is counting on your passivity. The counteroffensive is about proving, day after day, move after move, that passivity is gone. In the next part, we close with the war they can't win. What happens when you not only survive the siege, but turn your endurance into the weapon that breaks them completely. When they expect you to quit, your endurance is the attack. In a siege, the enemy's greatest weapon isn't their army, it's the calendar. They measure victory in the days you hold out before surrender. That's why survival isn't passive. It's active defiance. Every day you refuse to yield is a day their strategy fails. Sun Tzu warned, "When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard." Why? Because a desperate foe stops playing by the rules. They stop fearing the cost of resistance. And at that point, they're almost impossible to defeat. This is the war they can't win. The one where you become the desperate foe who has nothing left to lose by continuing. When you reach that state, quitting stops being an option. Not because you don't feel like it, but because you've seen what quitting actually does. You've seen who it rewards. You've seen how it confirms their judgment of you. And once you've seen that clearly, it becomes unbearable to hand them that victory. That's the shift you have to make. From "I'll keep going if it feels good" to "I'll keep going because it robs them of what they want." Because here's the truth. People underestimate how much of a weapon stubbornness really is. They call it pride. They call it obsession. They call it unhealthy. But in war, whether on the battlefield or in your own life, stubbornness is often the only thing keeping you alive. You will be tired. You will be outnumbered. You will feel the constant pull to step back, step down, step away. And that's exactly why endurance is so deadly. It ignores the pull. It doesn't negotiate with exhaustion. It doesn't wait for conditions to improve. It keeps moving, not because it's easy, but because stopping hands the enemy everything they wanted. Here's what most people don't realize. When you refuse to quit, you don't just protect yourself. You force them to keep spending resources, time, energy, attention that they thought they could save by making you fold. They start doubting their own plan. They start wondering if you know something they don't. And little by little, the siege becomes their burden instead of yours. The moment they realize you won't give them the satisfaction, the entire power dynamic shifts. They're no longer in control of the timeline. They're no longer dictating the terms. You are. And here's the irony. You don't have to win in the conventional sense to break them. You just have to outlast their will to keep fighting. That's the war they can't win. The war where the cost of fighting you becomes higher than the reward of stopping you. So here's your choice right now. You can keep seeing quitting as a personal decision, a private moment between you and yourself that affects no one else. Or you can see it for what it is, the most valuable gift you could ever give to the people who've bet on your failure. And if you see it that way, really see it, then every urge to quit becomes a challenge. Every moment you feel yourself breaking becomes an opportunity to make them break first. Because endurance isn't just about holding on. It's about forcing the other side to face a truth they didn't plan for, that you will not give them what they came for. In the end, this is the final question you have to answer. When the siege is over, do you want to be the one who lasted or the one who handed them the keys? Because they can take your time, they can take your comfort, they can take every easy path you thought you had, but they can't take your refusal. That's the part of the war they will never win.